Herzlich willkommen zum The UnleashPeople Podcast, dem Podcast für alle, die HR und Talent Acquisition strategisch denken. Wir, Ina und Christian, liefern euch gemeinsam mit Expertinnen und Experten regelmäßig frische Insights, die euch und euer Unternehmen voranbringen. Heute sprechen wir mit Kobi Ampoma, Head of Talent Acquisition Netherlands bei Heineken, über Corporate Recruiting und die Unterschiede zum Recruiting in Startups und Scale-Ups. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the UnleashPeople podcast. Today I speak with Kobi Ampoma, Head of Talent Acquisition Netherlands at Heineken. Hi Kobi.
Hey Christian, I hope you're doing well.
Yes, it's basically my last call for today, so let's be fast and see what's coming out of that.
I'm looking forward to it already.
Great, cool. So, Kobi, today I want to speak about corporate recruiting with you because my experience is more on startups and scale-ups and also some, let's call it small or mid-sized companies. And I'm not sure whether you can compare processes or anything that is really focusing on talent acquisition. So maybe you can give us a short overview on your take on corporate recruiting. What is corporate recruiting about, right? Is it big? Is it small? So just give us your insights, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, in my opinion, corporate recruiting is typically what you see in the people function or the HR function. You have different disciplines, and then you have talent acquisition or a recruitment team. And what a recruitment team typically will do is they will focus on different parts of the business, either tech, supply chain, corporate functions. And then within those sub-teams, you always have a process that you follow. Typically, there are different layers also within a process. You also have different specialism. So you may have a rewards team who is responsible for the philosophy of how we pay people. Right, you may have a people operations team that is following up when we hire somebody. Then the process moves from talent acquisition or recruitment team to the people operations team, where they actually, draft the contract, send to the employee. The employee fills all the information. They set up in the system, notify a manager to say, hey, on the first of this month, this employee is starting. These are the things that you need to do. Within corporate recruitment, we also have different moments where you touch base with the business as well. So there are a lot of different layers, I would say, within corporate recruitment compared to maybe a startup or scale-up where I also been part of, where, today we want to hire 20 people and let's move as fast as we can. And sometimes within corporate recruitment, there's a lot more time that you need to think about it. Is it okay? Is it approved? Who needs to be involved? So that's how I would explain that a little bit. More layers sometimes, more focus sometimes in different areas how you recruit is how I would explain the difference between corporate recruitment and maybe recruitment in a startup / scale-up environment.
Yeah, got it. So it is rather complex in comparison to a startup space.
Yes.
And for instance, I'm a huge fan of having one face to the candidate. So basically, I try to have one single touch point with the candidates throughout the complete journey. And that is basically from the attraction piece, first contact until salary negotiation and offer negotiation piece, so that there is, the candidates know whom to approach and that there is already you build up some good connections. Can you kind of do the same in the corporate world, or do you need to hand over to operations, to HR business partners? So what's your take on that?
So my take on it is that it's not as simple within corporate recruitment, and the reason why is that you do have different center of excellences, right? So I'll give you an example. Working for big international companies, sometimes you are hiring from abroad, right? So we may hire somebody from Germany to move to the Netherlands, and then there is a cutoff between the talent acquisition team and the mobility team. So then there is somebody who is then all of a sudden, hey, Christian, I heard that you're coming to the Netherlands. I can help you with
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z. So there is going to be a change in the people that you interact with, similar to a people operations individual. So
Mhm.
if people operations are involved, then they are then so all of a sudden a new step in the process where they say, hey, we understand that you've said yes to your offer, but we need X, Y, and Z to complete to make sure we can fully onboard you.
Mhm.
So I would say that, maybe working for a startup scale up, that may be the big differences. I've also worked for startup and scale up where, we were responsible for a little bit of the mobility. We were
Mhm.
responsible for a little bit of the, let's say, the operations part. But they were not very complex because typically a startup or a scale up is much more lean and mean from that perspective. So I would say that would be the biggest difference for sure.
Mhm. So how do you handle time or speed then, right? Because I can imagine that it always takes a bit more time to hand over things, to explain what you need, and what's how long does it take you to really hire someone whom you want to relocate to the Netherlands? So what's the time frame we are talking about here?
Well, it really depends. So when we talk about recruitment, I think there are a few things that's important. So one, we talk about your time to hire, right? So
Mhm.
how fast can you identify the right candidate? How can you move them into a process? How can you offer them the opportunity? And then based on a few elements of their backgrounds, their notice period,
Mhm.
do they have a EU citizenship? Yes or no? That may have an impact in their start time because you need to apply for maybe a working visa for
Mhm.
them as well. Those definitely have an impact. But I think one of the key skills that I think that recruiters need also in corporate recruitment is we talk about stakeholder management.
Mhm.
We talk about managing expectations.
Yeah.
So it is very important for you to be able to explain to a candidate in managing expectation what they should be expecting next, right?
Mhm.
Because they are going to be talking to two or three different people who are involved in a process.
Mhm.
So I would say first and foremost, taking somebody to the recruiting process for them to say yes when they offer the
Mhm.
opportunity, being explicit and explain to them what comes next, especially when people are moving abroad, right? Because
Mhm.
there's also an element of anxiety, new change, sometimes family are involved. So managing their expectation, either yourself or with a center of excellence team
Mhm.
who are guiding those process. So I would say, you know, we talk about having a benchmark, and I don't know what benchmark you have right now, but typically you see a benchmark of maybe 62 to 65 days for people to be hired, right?
Mhm.
At the moment, we are around on 45 days, which is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
but it just means identifying the candidate and them saying yes to the offer. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
when they start, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in my opinion, those are how you could maybe play a role as a recruiter in the corporate
Mhm.
space.
Yeah, got it. So, to be honest, the goal that I usually have had in my teams in the startup space was below 30 days
Mm,
time to offer. So as soon as a candidate enters the process until you offer should be no more than 30 days. So basically, it's a month. But we
okay.
don't have that many interfaces, right? We have a very streamlined process, and
Mhm.
it's kind of owned by the recruiter who is in charge of the role, right? So we don't need to align too much with different HR functions, so to say. And we also had the complete contracting in our ATS. So the recruiter sends out the contract and not another team
Mhm.
that you need to kind of inform beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I guess that's you can handle that. It is as it is, and there's no way you can change. What I'm curious about is, well, with such a big company such as Heineken, do you
Mhm.
have the same process globally, or do you have a different recruiting process in the Netherlands in comparison to whatever Denmark, the US, and how can you make sure that um, you have a consistent high quality in your hires
Mhm.
all over the globe. So I would imagine hiring a specific person in the US and the same role in the Netherlands, those folks should be able to replace each other. So if you move the US guy to the Netherlands, that person needs to be able to do the job as fast as the Dutch person in the US.
Well, um, I'll answer this question in two ways. So I
Yeah.
think within Heineken, it's very important to understand how mature your talent acquisition
Mm,
team is, right? I think in the Netherlands we are a little bit more mature, maybe compared to other parts of the world, right? So I have a team here where people really focus on having specific areas that they
mm,
recruit for. So they're familiar with the business, they're familiar with the industry, the talent, so to say. And then sometimes, it is a niche that we need to do a little bit more,
mm,
talent insight or understand that part a little bit better. But that's not always the case. You cannot really always say, hey,
mm,
somebody in the US should be able to do the job here. It depends on, is it like for like,
mm,
or is it specific for a specific function? But I think if you talk about the process, I would say, yeah, our processes across the globe, there are inconsistency. Why? Because of the maturity level of the different teams,
mhm,
right? So one of the things that I think that our global head of TA is doing a good job on is, hey, let's leverage the best practices that we have across the globe, right?
mm,
So, for example, we are now creating something within our team, what we called aligned way of working, right? So it means that every recruiter in our team should at least, 75% of our process be
mm.
aligned with everybody else in the team, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, when you recruit for different function, you may have, slightly different
Mm,
approaches, but overall, it should be consistent in our approach. Why do we want to do this? We want to do this because it makes sure that we are giving the business a certain level of service, right?
mhm,
And they are also familiar of how we work. If we are able to establish that, that will create consistency, which has an impact in the candidate journey, which has an impact
mm,
also in how people experience that. So I would say to your answer, yes, we are definitely inconsistent, but it
mm,
comes with the immaturity of the different functions that we may have
mm.
globally.
Yeah, yeah, got it. I also can imagine that it's super tough to find one common process globally, right? If you have so many different legal entities and countries and also um, way of attracting people, it's not very easy to have one common thing. But um, when I was starting at one of the scale-ups I have been working for, um, I found a situation where each office had a different recruiting process, right? And you couldn't compare anything. You couldn't even get meaningful data out of the tool because you had so many different steps and things that I was not able to measure time to hire, for instance, because I just didn't have the right data in place. There was data, but I really needed to make it on a office level and not on a global level.
Mm.
So for me as a recruiter, it was always super important to have at least a framework in place that applies to all hirings globally. And I had, but it was in 10 countries, not that big, but still in 10 countries, to be able to get some meaningful insights into how we work and whether we need to focus on different aspects in recruiting in the US in comparison to Germany or Poland, because that's what we would need to do if we want to kind of increase our impact in recruiting. So I imagine this to be a bit more difficult in the corporate world. On the other hand, you already mentioned candidate experience. So um, I have the impression that, let's call it my one face to the candidate approach, has a slightly higher candidate experience level than when you switch contact points. What do you think about that? How do you maintain a high level of candidate experience, even though you have different touch points in your process?
Well, I would disagree with you on this one. And the reason why is that, if you think about what is important to the candidate, right? And we
Mm,
can agree to disagree, but I think the most important thing is for them to understand what is the process,
mm,
right? And what can I expect next, right? So if what I can expect next is coming from Christian instead of Kobe, I
yeah,
may be okay with that, right?
yeah,
Typically what you see happening in a lot of corporates is sometimes there's a breakdown in what happens next and who is actually going to do it. So that's why I talked about managing the expectation better. But it also means we need to educate ourselves as a function what comes next and do I understand what next is, right? So, for example, we work very close to our people operations team. We have a weekly touch base with them. Why? We want to understand, hey, what is going well? What is not going so well? Is there gaps in education? Is there gaps in knowledge? How can we educate ourselves so we can be a business partner? At the end of the day, the candidate doesn't care, right? Who is supporting me, as long as they know that who is supporting them and what they can expect from them. So that's the only disagreement that I would have with you here. And I also think that, we are talking about corporate recruitment. Every corporation is also slightly a little bit different in terms of how they structure their people organization, right? You mentioned, working for different companies or different countries where there's inconsistency in the approach. Sometimes you have people working in corporate who do 50% recruitment. They're not 100% dedicated to that, right? That also has an impact in how they may approach things. Sometimes you don't have a benefits individual in the team who is specialized. So I think it also depends a little bit on how you structure your corporate or function, right? Typically, corporate functions are structured much more from an expertise perspective, right? Here as well, we have a center of excellences, we have rewards, we have people operations, we have TA, we have talent management. So you have different teams. You have the people business partner community. You have different teams that, as a recruiter, you need to know what others are doing. And that's why I call ourselves the talent broker. We are the broker. So we deal with talent and we deal internally with the different sub functions that we have.
Yeah, understand. Still, well, there is a bit of disagreement, but anyway, I get your point, right? And in theory, that approach is good. From what I've seen and from what I've heard from big corporates is that those touch points are not structured very, very well, so that you lose time, and that you're saying, so candidate, good, I will hand you over to contracting. They will send out the contract. And if I was a candidate, I would expect the contract to arrive within the next, let's say, 2 days, right? And sometimes that handover does not work properly, or there are some steps in between that have a waiting time of a week, or sometimes even more if you have a work council that needs to approve things and so on. So how do you manage that specific, let's call it black hole, that you can kind of fall into when it comes to candidate communication?
Yeah, I think that there are two ways that you can tackle it, Christian. So one is, and I think I mentioned this also earlier, how mature is your organization?
Yeah.
So as an example, for us, we hand over our contracting to our people operations teams. And in the beginning, that was not a smooth process, right? So then you work very closely with the team to understand, hey, what do you actually need from me to be able to deliver maybe faster, quicker, but also what can we expect from each other, right?
Yeah.
So if we have KPIs in place or SLAs in place, that's something that you can always look after in a month's time, like how did we do in our KPI? And when within our company now, we do track that. So we track how often, how many contracts are we giving to our people operations teams, and how quickly they are able to pick it up. And it's also something that we measure, we call first time right. So first time right is the recruiter handing over all the information that is needed for people operations to be able to take the next steps. That has to do with position management. That has to do with the right offer letter. That has to do with, any exceptions that is also maybe included in there. So I do think that is also a very important component. So, sometimes you say, within corporate, you have a lot of meetings. Yeah, that may be the case because you need to build relationship with sub teams. And to build that, you need to talk to each other. And the frequently you talk to each other, the better you understand, so that you can maybe have less frequent conversations. But that's how I would explain that, by having clear expectations, clear SLAs, and maybe KPIs in place, and also reviewing that periodically.
Yeah. completely understand. And to be honest, I'm a huge fan of SLAs. SLAs make so much sense even in smaller companies because you have a clear framework, you have a clear set of expectations, and everybody knows what their role in the complete recruiting process is. And there is also a clear understanding of how fast you need to be in what you're doing, which is perfectly fine. And I guess an SLA makes so much sense, even if it's a bit more, how can I say, yeah, it's a bit structured. It might look a bit over-engineered, but even in the short run, it helps you speed up things considerably. From what you just said, I guess, and that's just out of curiosity, how do you then hand over things? Do you have one tool that can handle the complete process, the complete life cycle of recruiting? So basically, you don't need to compile a document where you have everything in place, but you have the candidate profile, you have all information in there, you push a button, and then that thing is moved to the next person who is taking care of that. Am I
Yes.
right in this?
That's how we operate. We
Yeah.
have an HRS system that actually has all the information that is needed, but we do need to check that information, from time to time because sometimes position management is not right in place. We also need to input information as well. So there are a few things that you need to do before you push that through. But traditionally, what I've seen, for example, here is that when we push things through, when everything makes sense, we also improve on the drafting of our offer, which is also automated, right? So a company like Heineken right now, we try to focus on, hey, how can we improve on our system? How can we improve on our technology? And how can we make sure that we have less human touch points, which could be a potential error or a mistake, right? Because, we are all humans and we follow our processes, but we forget, we are distracted. That happens. So I would say that's how we try to do it. And we also try to provide input to our global systems teams in terms of, hey, what is working well, what is not working well, what can we change, what can we tweak to make sure that we have efficiency on both sides.
Yeah, got it. So that actually leads me to a question I did not want to ask initially, but now here we are, because AI is the thing right now, and a lot of stuff can be automated with AI. So from a corporate perspective, how would you use AI in your recruiting process? So I'm not saying or asking what you do, but maybe how you would leverage technology to make the process faster internally as well as externally.
Well, this is a great question, Christian. And I think by coincidence, last week I was at Microsoft and they did an event together with LinkedIn where they tried to share with us, the adoption of AI from an investment perspective. I believe in 2024, there was around $44 billion dollars invested in AI tooling. And I think AI can be an advantage for a lot of teams who adapt that quickly. So, for example, I believe AI can really help you when it comes to your sourcing, right? So, how can I do that faster? I believe AI can help you also, from a calendar management perspective. One of the challenge that we have as a team is that we spend 30% of our time scheduling, right?
Yeah.
So, if an AI can help us or different tools can help us, that's already an advantage that you can have. One of the complaints that I know that you have heard this before, there's never enough time in the recruitment space, right?
Yeah.
So if we have tooling that can free up a little bit more of our time for
Yeah.
us to engage better with the candidate, because I really believe that human aspect is still going to be there and help us automate a few things, right?
Yeah.
So it would definitely make us better professionals. So I'm a big believer of trying, testing, but then again, I also understood that the people function when it comes to adoption of tooling, we don't go as fast as sometimes we would like. So that is also a challenge in corporate. How do you get the right people on board to be able to test different things in big corporation? Because sometimes more people have an opinion. right or wrong before
Yeah.
something is allowed or compliant, and which is not always easy. I've worked for some startup and scale up where if you want to try something, yeah, go do it. But sometimes in a corporate it takes a little bit more time for you to get there.
Yeah, sure. And well, I guess everybody is trying out AI in a way. And that would be a complete different episode to speak about AI. So I will kind of leave it at that because otherwise we will spend another hour talking. But thank you very much for your insights on that. Basically, we are nearing the end, so I have one final question, and that is out of experience, because you have been in both worlds, corporate and startup. What can smaller companies learn from corporations when it comes to recruiting?
Hmm. Well, I think sometimes smaller companies don't always take recruitment seriously. Huh? Something you do on the side, and you bring the people, let's say, to me. So I think first and foremost, take your recruitment team or your talent acquisition function seriously.
Mhm,
I think sometimes smaller companies don't really invest in having talented people, professionals
mhm,
who have seen maybe different things that can help them move the needle, because the differentiator in a lot of companies is the people. So attracting the right people, right, can help you move and transition into the phase that you are going to be successful. And I've seen that not a lot of small companies don't always put the emphasis in that.
mhm,
Obviously, I'm part of the people team and I love being part of the people team. But I think sometimes the stories that I hear from other TA professionals
mhm.
or people professional in company, that leadership doesn't always take them seriously. I think that's the one thing that they should start doing more.
Yeah, yeah, you're completely right, and I guess that's the biggest, yeah, challenge we have in recruiting, um, to really provide the added value that we can. But that also, at least for me, requires that the recruiters, the professionals, are also continuously ramp up their skills and their approach, because if we want to contribute positively, we need to fully understand the business and we need to know
Yeah.
what's going on to be really that person who can, yeah, bring recruiting to the next level, so to say.
Yeah.
Um,
And maybe just to add on what you
yeah.
said, Christian, and that's advice I give everybody in the talent acquisition space: understand how your company make money. Right? Because if you understand how they make money, then you know what you can share with candidates, with talents. You have an advantage just by knowing that, understanding the company strategy, the people strategy, and how that translate into your own way of working. So I think that that's one of the most important things that I share with people in the talent acquisition space. Do you know the strategy? If the answer is no, that's where you need to start.
You're completely right, Kobe. And I guess that's a very good endpoint to our conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time with me. It was a pleasure discussing with you. And yeah, thank you very much and have a great rest of the day, Kobe. Bye.
Thank you for having me, Christian.
Das war's für heute. Vielen Dank, dass ihr bis zum Ende dabei geblieben seid und bis zum nächsten Mal.